for transport. This debate will be led by Diana Johnson. Minister, to move the motion formally.
I beg to move.
The question is, as on the order paper, Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd first of all like to thank members from across the House for their support for this debate, including my honourable friends for Harrow West and for Hammersmith for so ably presenting at the Backbench Business Committee, which I wasn't able to attend. And the range of support for this debate confirms that the Department of Transport's spending priorities are of national concern across party lines and in every region of the United Kingdom. And whether it's on rail franchising or transport investment, the Department for Transport is, I think, giving passengers and taxpayers a raw deal. Given this breadth of interest, I am disappointed, I have to say, that the Transport Secretary hasn't come along to the Chamber to hear this debate this afternoon. And I do recall when we had the backbench business debate on transport in the North on the 6th of November last year, he also wasn't able to attend on that occasion. But I'm very pleased to see the Shadow Secretary of State in his place. And it's also good to see the Honourable Member for the London seat of Orpington, who also serves as the Minister for London, who will be responding to the government in this debate. But I just also must say this, that I note in passing that not one minister in the Department of Transport represents a northern seat, and not one represents a seat outside England. Yeah. So in opening this debate, I do want to highlight the significant, long-standing problems with the way we both run our transport services and invest in transport infrastructure. I want to press the case for a bolder, more ambitious approach to transport spending that leaves no citizen, no nation and crucially no region behind, and an approach that will boost economic efficiency and growth post-Brexit. So the international evidence paints a stark and disappointing picture. Britain's infrastructure spending is the lowest of any developed country in the OECD. The inequality between our regions, measured according to gross value added, is the widest in Europe, and our national productivity, as we all know, is low compared with other countries. So these problems cannot be solved without better transport investment, better north-south, and also, very importantly, east-west connectivity. Experts from IPPR North to the Centre for Cities, and from the National Infrastructure Commission to the Northern Powerhouse Independent Economic Review are all agreed on this point. We cannot increase productivity and close the gap between our regions unless we dramatically upgrade our transport infrastructure and make up for decades of underinvestment. And this requires an ambitious investment programme for every corner of the country. In Northern England, that means investing in bus services, not cutting them, dramatically reducing rail journey times, increasing rail capacity for passengers and freight, and modernising our rolling stock.
Would my honourable friend give way?
Yes, I'm happy to.
And I congratulate my honourable friend on securing this really important debate of overall public spending on transport by region from 2012 to 2017. The North East received just 2.7% of that investment, compared with 38.3% received by London and the South East combined. And does my honourable friend agree with me that the North has little chance of fulfilling its true potential if this unacceptable imbalance continues?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that point, and it was one that I was just about to come on to, so I absolutely agree with what she says. It means, if we're serious about this, that we need to plug what the IPPR North has calculated to be a 36 billion gap in transport spending between London and the North. And it means accepting and building on Transport for the North's plans for our region, plans which by 2050 will not only create 850,000 jobs, but also partly pay for themselves by reducing the North's fiscal deficit by 47% compared with business as usual. But it also requires a new approach to running transport services. We need an approach to manage transport which works for fare-paying passengers, not dividend-troughing shareholders. Rail operators who mismanage services and threaten to default on their franchises cannot get away with it. Taxpayers' money and fair revenues should be spent on transport investment and not bailing out private companies that recklessly overbid. Regions outside London need statutory subnational transport bodies with the same clout and the same borrowing powers as Transport for London has. So now that, to be fair, we can't say that it's all the Transport Secretary or the Department of Transport's fault for the problems that I've just outlined, many of which relate to actions of successive governments of all colours and stretching back many decades. But of course the Minister is responsible for what happens on his watch, and we are entitled to hold the ministers in the Department of Transport to account for the steps that they take now, or indeed the steps they fail to take now, to tackle these problems. So I have 4 questions for the Minister. First of all, how does he intend to act on the criticism from auditors about the effectiveness of a range of transport bodies and transport projects? The NAO has been scathing of the performance of Highways England 2015 to 2020 road investment strategy, highlighting that many of the promised road investments are considerably behind schedule, and Network Rail's operations have also been subject to long-standing NAO criticism. The NAO has also turned its sight on the department's role in a range of projects and franchises, not least the Thames Garden Bridge in October 2016. So what is the government going to do about these criticisms? Secondly, in the wake of the East Coast debacle, the government needs to answer pressing questions about the state of our rail franchising system. The recent problems with the Stagecoach Virgin Trains East Coast franchise risk undermining the whole franchising process. It sends a message to future bidders that they can get their sums wrong and overbid, but still get a bailout to the tune of potentially over £1 billion. The Secretary of State's subsequent decision to extend the Virgin Trains West Coast franchise only reinforces this concern. And last month, the NAO rightly announced an independent investigation into what had happened. Since then, on the 5th of February, the Transport Secretary came to the House with sterner words about Stagecoach, but no concrete assurances that they wouldn't win a future bid. It stands, I have to say to the Minister, in stark contrast to the swift, decisive action which the noble Lord Adonis took after National Express threatened to default on the same franchise in 2009. Now, this debacle also exposes the huge problems, I think, with the broken franchising system. As parliamentary questions that I've tabled recently have shown that in recent years there have been fewer bids for rail franchises than were received at the start of the decade, and 13 franchises have been directly awarded without the promised competition since 2012. So I want the Minister to particularly respond to those concerns. My third question is this. If the Transport Secretary is so confident about the benefits of his transport upgrade programme and the scrapping of electrification, why will he not spell out the exact benefits that it will bring? Last year, when the Transport Secretary scrapped all electrification plans, of course outside the South East, in favour of bimodal diesel electric technology, he assured honourable members in a written ministerial statement that we no longer need to electrify every line to achieve the same significant improvements to journeys. So why have Transport Ministers proven unable to answer very specific written parliamentary questions I've tabled about the exact travel speed improvements, ongoing financial costs and emissions that passengers can expect from these new bimodal trains? Yes, I will give way.
The government has recently said they want to see the elimination of diesel traction on our railways in quite a few years. If we're going to cancel all the electrification schemes, how do we do that?
My honourable friend makes a very important point, and I'm hoping the Minister might respond to that as well. I think whilst ministers have admitted that the ongoing costs with the scrapping of electrification will be higher than would have been with electric trains. They have refused to set out by how much or what this means for future ticket prices. And although I've been told that the environmental impact of bimodal trains has been taken into account, I'm not clear that there's actually been an environmental assessment undertaken. So it looks like big decisions are being made in the apparent absence of some basic information. And it's also astonishing that we still do not know about the future of Transpennine rail electrification, as no official announcement has been made since the Transport Secretary cast doubt on the project in a media appearance in July 2017. And whilst I do acknowledge that the rolling stock is being upgraded, the very companies who are supplying the rolling stock are telling me that without improvement to the track, they won't be able to get anywhere near their maximum speed. And the developers at Great Western Railway have warned that their bimodal trains will be slower in diesel mode than the ones that they replace. So will the Minister commit, I hope this evening, to an urgent independent assessment into the impact of scrapping electrification? And finally, and most crucially, I will give way one more time, yeah.
I agree with an awful lot of what she has to say, particularly on the appalling journey times east-west in this country, which are a national disgrace, but which are the fault of generations of governments' failure to invest. Can I urge her, though, in her fourth questions, to add a fifth question, which is around community transport, because this is a huge concern given the consultation which has gone out. Never mind getting from city to city, many of my constituents are concerned about the potential devastation of community transport if the proposals the department is consulting on do indeed go ahead. So can she add that to her list of questions to the Minister?
Very pleased to add that to the list of questions, and I think the honourable member has made that very clear what he wants to have the response from the Minister about. So my final point really is about tackling regional inequality in transport spending. House of Commons Library analysis from earlier this month shows that in the 5 years since 2012, London has received over twice as much per head as the North. The figures for the future projections spend look even worse. IPPR North's latest analysis shows that looking forward, London is to get £4,155 per head over the next 4 years, compared with £844 per head in Yorkshire and the Humber. Now, the Transport Secretary could have responded to those figures with a candid acceptance of the problem going back over many years and made a commitment to closing this regional gap. Instead, he sought to play down this disparity. And in an article in the Yorkshire Post in January, the Transport Secretary criticised IPPR North for including all of Transport for London spending in its analysis because many London and South East schemes attract private funding. And that's precisely the reason that Northern MPs want a statutory body with the same borrowing powers as TfL to boost private investment for road and rail schemes alongside a fairer share of state funding. Transport for the North's creation, whilst welcome, will not correct this inequity, and certainly not any time soon. Its focus on 2050 means many South East schemes, more advanced in their planning, like Crossrail 2 and the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Corridor, will happen many years earlier than Transport for the North's vision. Indeed, as I pointed out to the Minister during the passage of the Space Bill, we are more likely to see commercial space travel than the rail electrification to Hull before 2050. So in conclusion, the Secretary of State, I believe, has questions to answer on the scathing National Audit Office reports into the spending by the Transport Department. I also believe that the Secretary of State has wavered in his response to problems with the East Coast franchise and let Stagecoach and Virgin Trains off the hook. And the Secretary of State has scrapped rail electrification plans across the North, Midlands, South West and Wales, but has failed to back up the claims that these cutbacks will deliver the same benefits as electrification. And to finish on this point, the Secretary of State has dismissed the concerns about the regional inequality in transport investment, even though it's vital for our national economic productivity and growth. And as a Northern MP, I'm not asking what the country can do for the North, but I am asking what can the North do for the country, and it's time that the Transport Secretary and the Department of Transport also ask themselves that question.